this assignment, we looked at quadratic graphs, we looked at the number of solutions, and where the solutions occurred. If the vertex was on the x-axis, then we had one solution. If the vertex was above or below the x-axis and the graph opened in opposite directions, it was no solution. On the back, we graphed quadratics. So again, our main goal is to identify A, H, and K, get our vertex, and then plot our points. Upon plotting points, either from the table or from the graph, we should easily be able to see our roots. You can check your roots by plugging them back in and seeing that they become 0 when you plug them into the equation. So again, 21, getting points from a table. When you graph on your quiz or on your homeworks, you should always have 5 points. So there should always be 2 to the left and 2 to the right, as well as the vertex. What's up, guys? So your points are just the opposite. So if you moved your 81 to the right versus moving 81 to the left, that's fine. The graphs can be reflections of each other whenever we move our equations and they're set equal to 0. So if your graph is a reflection of mine, open up, that's totally fine. So some of the graphs, the way that they're solved, can have reflections of each other. So like that could happen in your 26 as well. All your points could be the opposite of all fine if you moved your x squared to a different side. But the roots should be the same. So the roots will not change, your points will just be opposites. Okay, my problems might jump a little bit from yours. I'll get the rest of the numbers to match you, no worries. And then I want to talk about the number theory questions. So I will walk you through a couple of the word problems that were on the back of that last page, because I know some of those were giving you a little bit of trouble. So these are the types of questions that we used to look at in algebra. So it says, use a quadratic equation to find the two real numbers that satisfy each situation. It says their sum is negative 15 and their product is negative 54. So you might be able to look at that and figure out what numbers make it 4. Their sum is 4. And their product is 117. So again, same idea. And here's where your graphs or tables could be opposite. If you move the 117 over versus moving the x squared and the 4x over. So my h value is 2, my k value is 2 squared minus 4 times 2 minus 117. And then to find our vertex, once again, we're looking at our graph in a way and looking for those roots. So we can see here, and again, our graph is going to be pretty large, that I have one root to the left and one root to the right, which tells me I have one negative and one positive answer. So putting 2 in the middle of my table and working my way out. Now, how many of you could look at this and factor it? Because that's what we're going to in 5-3. How to factor that type of problem? Because if you could factor it, that's what we're moving to, which would give you your roots through factoring. So you'd need two numbers that multiply to negative 117 and add to negative 4. So you could find your roots via graphing. You can find your roots via factoring. There are multiple ways to find them, and that's what we're working at. So right now we're doing the graphs and the tables. after that quiz, we're going to move into factoring and quadratic formula. So your answers would be 13 and negative 9. So again, if you got it from factoring, that's fine. If you sent a sketch out, that's fine. If you were to do your table this way, you'd have to go pretty far out. Yes?
So for number 1, I got negative 18 is 3.
Me too. I think on the top where you did 54, the second time like you write it on the equation.
Did I drop a negative? I did. No, you're good. See where I lost my negative? Thank you. You know, I was looking at it thinking it should be a whole number, and I remembered having a whole number. And I was like, I went back and looked a few times. I was like, I know I dropped something. Hi, negative. So if you throw your negative back on there, how'd you wait till now to tell me that?
Well, I wanted to see if I got the same one as you for number 2 because I wasn't close on number 1.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, because now if I move my 54 over, it'd be positive, which would give me a 3 and an 18, where I had it negative. And again, because I have the negative y squared, they're going to be the opposite of what you would think they are. And then once you solve them back, you would get y equals 3 and y equals negative 18. Because you could also have y squared plus 15y minus 54, which would be much nicer to factor. So over here, since you have a negative y squared, you'd have to have like one negative y and one positive y, and then flip-flop your signs so that you had one negative for the 54 and one positive for the 54 to get your negative y squared. And then, so like if I had y minus 3 here, because of that positive, that would end up being a positive 18 there, and then FOIL it backwards. So my suggestion, and that's what, Jalen, when you asked your question about your graph opening the opposite direction, what happens is if you move your x squared to the left or move it to the right, if you make it positive or negative, it's going to change the reflection of the graph. So I have a tendency to move it to whatever side will make it positive, because I don't like working with a negative x squared or a negative y squared, because it tends to lead to multiplying problems, which if you're like me and drop a negative, it leads to that as well. So this one isn't about, it's going to be a table, and in the middle, it doesn't factor nicely when you do x plus y equals 12 and x times y equals negative 84. And then here you should get negative 6 and negative 7. And then here x plus y equals negative 8. X times y equals negative 209. And that gives x equals negative y minus 8. factors of 2 and 9. Let's sum to 8. Alright, flip that. So y equals negative 19 and y equals 11. A question like this is an SAT style question. I took these kind of off of I saw the first one on an SAT practice test, so then I took them out of our textbook and added them to this. Quadratics are all over the SATs, so you guys just took your PSATs. You will take your SATs probably about this time next year. So you'll have some trig stuff. Were there trigs on your PSATs? Like sine or cosine or anything like that?
No.
Okay, so see, I wondered if they geared the PSATs to a group knowing they weren't going to know that. Yes.
How many are you going to have?
Probably one. All right, so what I want to do for today is the lesson check in your note guide. So it should say 5-2 lesson check at the top. But it should be in the pocket. Okay. So it says identify the vertex, axis of symmetry, max, min, domain, range, etc. So this is in standard form. My vertex is h comma k. So since we're in standard form, I have to find h. So you have h equals negative 2/3. Plugging that back in, we solve for k. My axis of symmetry is x equals h. And again, when we look at our max or min, the max or min is always the k value. In this case, since the graph has a negative a, we are going to have a max. And my max is at k. So since my k value was 22/3, my max is at 22/3. The domain of any quadratic is always all reals. And the range is always the y with respect to the k. And then again, it's whether the k value is open up or open down. So since I have a max, my graph is open down. Therefore, the range is less than or equal to. Creating the table, you have 0, 1, 2. Adding h to that. Create some fractional points, and then doing ya plus k. So negative 3 plus 22 thirds. Well, 22 thirds is kind of like 7. So you get 4 1/3, or 13 thirds. And negative 12 plus 22 thirds gives a negative 14 thirds, which is about negative 4.6. So when we're graphing these points, we're obviously going to be estimating. Your graphs on your test will probably not include decimals because I want to see nice, pretty points and be able to grade and judge that. Not to say if you have a problem like this that you're not graphing, you may not get asked with a more complicated vertex. So negative 2 thirds, and like I said, 22 thirds is like 7 1/3. So there's your vertex up at the top. And then you plot 1/3 and 13 thirds. So 13 thirds is like 4. So again, to the right and to the left, each moving out that 1 unit away. And then you have 1 1/3 and negative 14 thirds. If you created this table and I asked you for the roots, then you would say your roots are between 1/3 and 1 1/3, as well as in the opposite direction, which would be like negative 1 minus 2 thirds, which would be negative 1 2 thirds, and negative 2 2 thirds, which is the point you're seeing right here and right there. Okay, number 2. My axis of symmetry is always x equals, make sure you write it as an equation. It's that h value, so negative b divided by 2 times a. So in this case, it's a negative divided by a negative, which is a positive, and 2 over 4, which is 1/2. Your vertex comes from plugging 1/2 in. And your test will be non-graphing calculators, so you can have like one of the simpler calculators, but you will not be allowed to have a graphing calculator on the quiz. I will have a box of like the younger calculators, just so you can use it for math. So your vertex is at 0.5, negative 4.5. This graph is again negative, so we have a max at negative 4.5. Domain is always all reals. Don't miss those points. And range in this case is less than or equal to k. Creating your vertex, you have 0.5, negative 4.5, and then plotting your additional points. So again, your vertex is at 0.5, negative 4.5. Then your next point would be at negative 6.5, 1.5. And if you go one to the left of that, it would be at negative 0.5. And then one more point down at 2.5, you'd have negative 8 minus 4.5, which is negative 12.5. So we're talking way down here. Yep, what's up? Yes. Okay. So here we have our graph again. This graph would have no solution or no roots. This graph has no solution or no roots. Writing in vertex form means you need to identify a what? Okay, go to the restroom then. The nurse actually isn't here. Can I call the office? Okay, your H value is negative 4 over negative 2 or positive 2. And then K is plugging that value in. So in vertex form, you get negative 1x minus h squared plus k, or negative 1x minus 2 squared minus 1. So we're going to finish the rest of the lesson check on Monday. Your homework is that 5-2 day 3. It may not be in total order, so it's 5-2 homework day 3. We'll do the back of the lesson check on Monday as well as the in-class review.